I am Carolyn de la Pena, and I'm trying to get used to this microphone, which is really sensitive. I am a professor of American Studies at UC Davis, and I'm also, well, a few things, but most important to me right now probably is that I am the co-coordinator of a group of about 30 faculty and graduate students who work across the UC system. And we're all humanists or social scientists, and we're all interested in food and the relationship between food and the body. So we're helping build the next generation of scholars in this area that's so critically important. I'm also the author of a book, and I'll just take a second to give a little plug. It's called Empty Pleasures, the story of artificial sweeteners from saccharin to Splenda. And I just finished it. And what I'm really intrigued by in that project is the relationship between the food that we can produce in the US and that we've been so committed to producing since World War II, lots of food, cheap food, and coming up with really smart marketing systems to run that food through our bodies, sometimes calling it diet food, which is a nice way to move a lot more food through our bodies with no real proof that it actually has made us thinner or healthier in the end. And I think that makes me a good person to moderate this panel because I'm really interested in technology. I'm a believer that people who work on food technology and people who work on food culture have to work together. And I've also seen historically how when our technological know-how isn't well connected to our broader goal of health, that it doesn't necessarily produce the right answers for us as Americans. So I think what I'd like to do for this session is to go ahead and introduce all of our panelists, and then I will cede the floor to them, and I'll moderate some questions at the end so we can have a dialogue. I think that it makes sense to go in this order, so if it's okay, I've decided that this is what we'll do. And it kind of mixes things up a little bit, but I think there's a good reason for that. Our first speaker will be Stephen Craig, who is a senior research scientist at Virginia Cobia Farms, where he came after 7 years as an associate professor of aquaculture nutrition in the Virginia Maryland Regional College of Veterinary Medicine. His research is focused on quantitative nutritional requirements for emerging aquaculture species, the development of species-specific diets, alternative protein and lipid sources for aquafeed incorporation, and interactions between nutrition and immune function. Stephen's going to be talking today about his work on the decline of wild-caught fisheries and the role of marine aquaculture in supplying future demand, and the role of technology in creating a sustainable aquaculture industry that promotes environmental stewardship while increasing production efficiencies. Our second speaker I'd like to propose will be Jane Silverthorne. Is that okay with you, Jane? Okay, great. And she's the manager of the National Science Foundation Plant Genomic Research Project. Her training is in plant biology on the role of the phytochrome. Did I say that correctly? Yes, good. Phytochrome system in regulating plant growth and development. And prior to coming to NSF, she was a professor of molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at right next to me, right down the road at UC Santa Cruz. And in addition to her duties as the division director of the NSF's Integrative Organismal Systems, she's also the executive secretary for the Interagency Working Group on Plant Genomics and the US-EU Task Force on Biotechnology. Dr. Silverthorne is going to be discussing the National Plant Genomic Initiative as a way of illuminating how new technologies in basic research can be tools to ensure the production of sufficient nutritious foods to feed the needs of today's and tomorrow's population. So I'm really excited that we have a couple of premier scientists with us to talk about what's possible and what they're actually doing on the ground and what they see. And we also have with us Brian Halweil, who's a leader in the local food movement, a senior fellow at the World Watch Institute, where he's focused on organic farming, biotechnology, hunger, and where he directs the Nourishing the Planet project. He's also the editor of Edible East End and the editor of that, and the author of Eat Here, Reclaiming Homegrown Pleasures in a Global Supermarket. He's committed to illuminating the social and ecological impacts of how we eat And he likes to do that in close proximity to his garden and orchard in Sag Harbor. Brian's going to be talking about 3 shifts that he really thinks will help the world confront the food challenges it faces, from erratic climate and global food markets to persistent hunger, and on the flip side, obesity-related health problems that are increasing. So please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I think I'm a member of a small startup company called Virginia Cobia Farms. As we move forward to market our product, which is a marine saltwater fish that we grow, a white flesh fish, we find that more and more people are interested in where their food's coming from, how it's produced, and so I think this is a very timely symposium. What I'd like to talk to you about this morning is basically a brief introduction on seafood, some facts and figures. I think it ties in nicely with the keynote speaker and his thoughts this morning. Then move into aquaculture, which is basically the culture of organisms under a controlled environment, for a loose definition. Talk about some trends and some techniques. And then give you an overview of recirculating aquaculture, which is what my company's engaged in. We certainly feel very strongly this represents a future and the most efficient and environmentally friendly way to produce seafood. And then talk a little bit about some technologies for the future, some that we're using right now in terms of our company and our production, and others that we hope to develop down the road. So what I'd like to start off with this morning is talk about the seafood gap. And again, this ties in nicely with the keynote address this morning. On the chart on your right there, or the left there, is a per capita seafood consumption from 1960 to 2003. And that number, about 21 kilograms per person, that's an average in the United States. We're at about 16 to 17 kilos per person. China, of course, and the Asian countries are up to 28, 30. So this is somewhat of an average, global average. You can see a significant increase from the 60s into the 2000s. And then the global population, of course, increasing rapidly, just over 6 billion people in 2003. And where's the seafood going to come from? If we just assume a flat per capita, no increase in the per capita consumption, with the increase in global population, most people, these numbers are very bouncy and hard to track down, but most people agree will require between 40 and 60 million more metric tons of seafood products by 2025. So that we've talked about the blue revolution for some time in aquaculture, and we haven't been all that successful in achieving some of our goals. It's still out there, and we're a young industry. We've made some mistakes in the past. We're paying for a lot of those right now, and so it's our job to learn from the past, learn from other production sectors, and not make those mistakes again. Basically, the wild-caught seafood has been flat since the late 1980s. And this is despite the increase in technology and fishing efforts, side scanning, sonar, the whole bit. We're very efficient at harvesting the oceans, and we've endangered many of the standing stocks of wild-caught seafood over the years. So that dark blue line represents the wild catch, and the light blue, of course, it represents aquaculture. And again, these figures, they bounce around, but these are fairly conservative. Right now, we're producing about 40% of the global seafood population through aquaculture. Again, we're going to have to ramp that up. It's obvious that the wild-caught fisheries will not be able to supply the need and the product demand of the future. Again, about 70% of the oceans are overexploited. We hear a lot about that in the press on a daily basis. And then where we're interested in is the farming of marine fish, because most people like the flavor and the texture of marine fish. They're healthier for you. You've heard a lot about N3 or omega-3 omega-3 fatty acids in terms of human health. I'll talk a little bit about that more in the next couple of slides. And saltwater fish basically contain more of these healthy fatty acids for the human population. And the other interesting fact is the economics of this. In the U.S., we import about 80% of our seafood, and that comes out to about $14 to $15 billion. So that's second only to oil in terms of what we import and a trade deficit. So there's a very large financial stake in all this as well. So as I mentioned, in the U.S., certainly our self-sufficiency is declining fairly rapidly. Again, about 80 to 86% of our seafood is imported, and this continues to grow. Shrimp make up the most of this deficit. Most of that's cultured in Asia, and Indonesia, and China. We do grow about 95 to 99% of our chickens here. So what we feel is that we should be able to do that from an aquaculture perspective. We have many problems with imported seafood in terms of food safety, different culture practices, and environmental degradation in developing countries. And we feel like a domestic aquaculture industry would go a long way to solving a lot of these problems. And we certainly feel like that now the time is right with technology and economies of scale that we can compete and develop this domestic industry. Again, food safety is becoming a major battleground. There's Arnie, I guess he's no longer going to be governor out there, but California has been very instrumental in some of these regulations. The consumer's confused, basically. You have a lot of talk about organic production, sustainability. Finally, California just, in terms of seafood, just stopped letting anybody label any seafood as organic until everything's sorted out. The U.S. consumer is confused. I mean, we're telling them, eat more seafood, it's healthy for you, but it's got mercury and dioxins and all this other stuff. It's a very confusing situation for the consumer, and so people are, when they get confused, they hunker down and they usually are frightened away from that product. Again, DHA, which is the main N3 fatty acid or omega-3 fatty acid for human health, it's a key food for cognitive function, for basically very young and very old people. It's very helpful for them. And we feel like we can produce a very high quality DHA-rich product. Fish is good for you. It's lean, it's high protein, and then the fats that are there are good for you. So it's a great opportunity from a marketing standpoint. And again, so nutrition and health is becoming more and more complex. You've got the internet. So much information is out there and available to the consumer. But just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So there's a lot of again, confusion. We all hear about the impacts of overfishing and the lack and the destruction of biodiversity of these stocks. And then you have your doctor saying, eat a lot of seafood, eat more seafood. And then, oh, but wait, it's got mercury in it. So again, this is part of the confusion. Seafood is good for you. There are certain products and stocks that, of course, you should avoid. And then again, this is why we feel from an aquaculture perspective, it's a great opportunity to come in there, produce these fish correctly, optimize the health benefit to the consumer in terms of the final product, and push this product out so that people can feel safe and secure feeding it to their kids. So omega-3s, just a little bit on those. You know, what do they do? You hear a lot about the beneficial impacts of omega-3 fatty acids to human health. This is a life extension magazine, and of course, this company's trying to sell supplements, obviously. But these are a list of some of the things they've attributed to the increased intake of DHA or omega-3 fatty acids. Increased cognitive function, subduing aggression, Some people say it's better than Prozac in terms of treating depression, intervention for bipolar disorder, and then cognitive function and Alzheimer's. So in terms of the baby boomers, we're very dialed in on the Alzheimer's thing. There is no recommendation for EPA or DHA. Those are the two main omega-3 fatty acids. This magazine recommends between 1 and 3 grams a day of EPA and 1 and 5 grams a day of DHA. Now that's a very high level of these nutrients. Now you can get this from a pill and a supplement, which they'd like to sell you, but what we'd like to do is provide that in a fish and a fillet product that's healthy and clean and free of contaminants. And that way you get the benefit from eating a high protein, low fat meal, but you also get the benefits of the DHA incorporation. So that's just a real brief background of seafood and the attributes of seafood that make it very good for you to eat. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about aquaculture and past and future techniques. This is the traditional way to farm marine fish, and these are on the top two panels there. Those are Norwegian salmon farms, and the salmon farms are a lightning rod for aquaculture. They've done a lot of things that aren't good, and they've taken a lot of heat from the environmentalists, and rightfully so. These farms are getting better and doing a better job, but again, they have a long history of not doing such good things out there. The lower two panels are kind of the new state-of-the-art type fish cages. These are submersible cages, so those do a couple things. It gets them down below the surface of the water so people can't see them, which is a big thing in terms of coastal areas. And also it protects them from storms and hurricanes. A lot of these, the best sites for growing marine fish in the ocean happen to be in the Hurricane Alley, if you will. So just 2 weeks ago, a farm in Belize lost almost all their surface cages when a hurricane went right over the top of them. So these are emerging technologies. Again, this is a traditional way to grow marine fish. You put these cages out in the ocean. Historically, it's been less expensive because seawater was free. You don't have to pump it. You just let the currents move back and forth. You got fresh, clean seawater. The fish grow very well, and very, very low need for land-based infrastructure. You're out there in the ocean, and you have boats and divers, and it's a very tried-and-true system. There are a lot of issues facing offshore aquaculture, and these have been outlined in great detail by a lot of the environmental groups. The main problem is disease and disease transfer to wild stock. You have these fish, a lot of times they aren't even endogenous to that area in terms of local species. They can transfer disease such as sea lice and different bad viruses. You do have the impacts of uneaten feed that floats out of the cages, so that can increase water pollution in the local area. These fish also can escape, and so again, if they aren't native to that area, you've got that problem. The other issue that a lot of people don't talk about is these fish actually mature and spawn in the cages, so we call that gamete pollution. So they can actually spread, their gametes in terms of fertilized eggs into the environment. You have the extreme weather conditions, as I mentioned, the hurricanes and that sort of stuff. And accessibility, you're usually 8 to 10 miles from the coast, so you have to have boats to get out there and divers and everything else. So what comes with that is, of course, increased fuel cost, increased fuel consumption, and what we're starting to look at is the carbon footprint of this type of culture system. So we feel like we can produce marine fish in land-based, large-scale production units, and we feel very strongly this is a part of the global solution to seafood supply. Now, that's our facility there in the lower right-hand corner. It's not as sexy as a net pen, and no divers. You're not in the ocean and swimming with the fishes and doing all that. You could drive by our facility, and you'd never know we were growing fish in there. But it does give us complete control over the culture environment. it allows us to manipulate different things, and I'll go into that in a little more detail later. But again, we feel it's the way of the future, using technology and different technologies from other sectors of industry that haven't been meshed together before like we're doing it. So with that, I'll go into recirculating aquaculture. This is a schematic at the top. This type of culture has been around for 20 or 30 years. In the past, it's always been thought of as way too capital intensive, too expensive, and not reliable enough. And we've solved many of those problems. Basically, you have the 2 culture tanks, and then it's essentially a water treatment system attached to the culture tanks. You have a drum filter which screens out the solids. Then you sterilize your water with ultraviolet light to take care of any pathogens or bacteria. And then you use biological filtration, or another sets of bacteria that convert the ammonia, which is toxic to fish, and they release it as a waste product, into a less toxic form of nitrate. And then, as I'll show you later, in our farm, we're taking that waste stream and concentrating those solids and producing a biogas, which we can then burn through a generator and heat our water and pay for our electricity that way. The graphs on the lower right there, you can see the red lines are growth curves in recirculating systems compared to the similar species grown in a net pen. So because you can control all the environmental variables, you get much better growth rates and much more efficient production. So again, these are some of the advantages of land-based recirculating aquaculture systems, or RAS is what we call them. You can put these things anywhere. You can don't have to be along the coast. Coastal land is usually much more expensive. We're located in a little town called Saltville, Virginia. It's economically depressed. The people are dying for jobs there, and so it's a great fit for us. You can control the disease and quality control at every step of production. And this is very critical. Disease accounts for one of the largest losses in any aquaculture production system. So that's very important aspect. Again, production environment is totally controlled. Our temperature doesn't vary more than 0.2 of a degree up or down. It's just a constant environment, which is very good for the fish. And this is just some more benefits of the recirculating aquaculture systems. Again, the land-based advantages are becoming more and more evident from a commercial standpoint, and the technology is developing such that where the prices are dropping, and this form of production is becoming more economically viable as related to the net pens. And here again, it's less expensive ground transport. Again, carbon footprint. We can grow these fish inland and then transport them into the interior of the United States to the big markets, usually within a day by truck versus 7 to 10 days from a net pen. So it's a fresher product, lower carbon footprint, and we think a much healthier product. And this is just a breakdown of the costs of sea cages versus RAS units in the United States. And you can see basically that bottom line is the costs are pretty much dead even now. So we feel we can move forward from a financial standpoint. And again, the carbon footprint is very important. In Europe, they're already starting to label food with how many grams of CO2 it took to produce that gram of food. So we're very competitive. This is based on 1 million pounds of seafood air freighted from Vietnam or Ecuador versus trucking on the road from Saltville. So this is another key point in terms of the environmental stewardship and growing these animals. And then very quickly to end up, technologies for the future. This includes low salinity, green energy, which I've touched on, and I'm a fish nutritionist, so I got to talk about feed innovation very quickly with you. We grow marine fish, again, hundreds of miles from the coast based on a non-GMO. It's a calcium receptor that the president of our company discovered as a human doctor working at Harvard. And it's a calcium receptor. It maintains the right osmotic balance in your body. You're a modified bag of seawater walking around. Well, we can use that and grow a marine fish basically in fresh water by tricking the fish based on different calcium magnesium ratios and then putting some salt in the diet. The fish is perfectly healthy, happy, and thinks it's in full strength seawater. This allows us to move away from the coast. Again, we can make our seawater very cheaply. Again, there's no genetic modification, and it gives us tremendous advantages in terms of how many fish we can grow in a certain area based on chloride discharges. And again, since we're away from the coast, we're totally biosecure and disease-free. That's a huge technology platform that our company's based on. The other thing that we're doing that's very unique is combining different technologies from different sectors. There's our RAS unit in that upper square. We're going to create fish out the door that side. But again, we're going to collect all our waste, which we do anyway when we clean the water. We route that through an anaerobic and an aerobic digester, and we can produce biogas, which will drive generators and create heat and electricity, which we need and we use a lot of. And then we can capture the CO2 off of that generator, funnel it back into algae growth, and either incorporate that back into a fish food or use that for different sources and uses. And this is about as tight a closed circle as you can get in terms of recirculation. We're using every input and output, and we feel this will allow us to be the very lowest cost producer as well as the greenest producer and the lowest carbon footprint of any fish producer out there. That's what the waste looks like on the left, and this is a busy slide, but basically with the 1 million pounds of fish, we can generate 400,000 kilowatts of electricity and almost 3 million cubic feet of natural gas. So it's very significant, and it's very important. And we feel it's a way to drive the industry in the future to be truly sustainable. And then feed, finally, again, I'm a nutritionist, so we've got to talk about feed. We grow our fish. These are marine fish. We have very low fish meal diets. We can grow these fish with 0 fish meal. And that's important from a sustainability issue. Now, when you take the fish meal, fish oil out, you reduce those DHA levels. So what we do is we finish the fish at the end with a sustainable algal-produced DHA product, so we can boost that level back up. And again, all this is getting away from marine proteins and marine lipid sources, so we aren't impacting the natural stocks of fish, and we're growing a healthy product. And this is just a quick diet slide. Again, this is a 10% fish meal diet. We're the only only cobia producer that's been rated as a best choice with the Monterey Bay Seafood Watch program. So we're very proud of that, and most of that's based on the feed development. Again, we don't need fish meal. We can grow these fish on a purely plant-based protein diet. It's a great fish to work with. It's a very tasty fish, and we think it's a great product out there that's truly sustainable. So, in summary, again, this seafood deficit's real. The population, the per capita increase, we have to go to aquaculture to supply this gap. But we have to do it sustainably. We have to pay attention to the environment, and we have to pay attention to producing a good product. There are opportunities for local niche-based markets, certainly. What I'm describing here is very capital intensive, and so it's probably going to be for some of the bigger players in the industry. And we feel technology has to be part of the business model, and we follow that certainly with our technology. And the bottom line is a healthy, safe, contaminant-free fish product for the consumer. So, thank you very much.